Okay. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For everyone out there watching, this is the director-producer, Lucy Walker. It's really quite an honor to have two-time Oscar-nominated documentary filmmaker Lucy Walker joining us tonight.
All right.
Um, so yeah, this film covers so much ground, and I'm really fascinated by your decision to document these two seemingly very different communities dealing with one very common disaster. So I guess tell us where that idea came from.
Well, several places. I've been working on the film already for quite a long time. Can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yes.
I've been working on the film already almost a year and really kind of prepared a lot and kind of learned a lot and knew what I was looking at and knew how to work with the firefighters and just had thought I was making the actual film, but it turned out that was sort of more a preparation. And so when that incident came along, I was really sort of poised and I felt very kind of equipped and financed and sort of ready to go. And so it was just a matter of practicality that was just sort of, we were already making the film when this incident happened. And it sort of both fires seemed really, incredibly important and fascinating to cover. And there was a precedent, there was an inspiration in an essay by Mike Davis, who actually appears in the film. There's an essay called The Case for Letting Malibu Burn, which is a controversial essay he wrote that kind of looks at a fire in Malibu that happened the same day as a fire in a very low-income neighborhood downtown, and kind of takes a kind of economic approach, and it's quite interesting. And so I had probably been inspired by that to think, well, it's not actually unuseful. It's actually kind of a great binocular lens to look at these twin incidents. And I think kind of in understanding the similarities and the differences, you actually get a really good case study about the issue at large, which was always what I was interested in. I was always trying to get at the sort of general problem that we're faced with. I quickly realized that following one fire or another was kind of inadequate because we keep getting bigger ones, as we're seeing now with the Dixie Fire, second biggest fire in California history, is burning as we speak, and started just meters from the campfire on Camp Creek Road, same PG&E electrical towers, exact same place. So it's obviously a widespread problem. We're also seeing fires in Greece. So I was really interested in the bigger problem, but of course I like to tell stories with characters and verite moments and details. And so I was always looking to try to understand the bigger picture from actually, following things on the ground through real people's unfolding events. So I think that's the long answer.
Well, I have to say, having also seen Rebuilding Paradise, where I got very emotionally invested in what happened there. When you get to the scene in your film where they're at the city council meeting, making that awful decision not to put in place the decision not to put in the 5 feet barrier, I found myself so viscerally angry at those people not wanting to plan for the future. And I guess I'm wondering, like, having had their story now documented by 2 filmmakers, like, what is their sort of understanding of like how the outside world is seeing their plight? I mean, because it's sort of a small community that's now been kind of become, I don't want to say like a poster child, but like become kind of a real emblematic community for the devastation of forest fire.
Listen, they're in it. They're evacuated or burning right now. I mean, I'm just getting Facebook message after Facebook message from my characters saying, thank you. I can't believe I'm in it again. you know, they know what's really going on. I was worried because I think the film is really confrontational, and I, you know, love these people really. I really enjoyed getting to know them and really appreciated how welcoming they've been, and genuinely appreciated our discussion and actually how we've come to really become friendly and bond and enjoy time together and enjoy discussion really across political lines. And I felt really grateful for that time, kind of outside of my own filter bubble. And it's like, we should all do that. And I really came to see their points of view on many things much better than before. And yet it's a very challenging film. It doesn't take the easy kind of there approach. And yet they've been extremely, you know, I haven't had any pushback at all, which I was sort of worried might happen, and nothing but really sweet appreciation and going to see the movie and wanting to tell their friends and, you know, sharing it. So I'm kind of like, okay, because I think it is true. And I think that, you know, listen, if I felt like the answer was like, yay, let's rebuild as fastly and cheaply as possible, you know, if I thought that was the true thing, I probably would have like watched Ron Howard's film and said, great, he got it. You know, I don't think that was correct. I think that seemed like a really nice idea if you knew nothing about it and you came up with the idea before you actually like got on the ground and looked at what was going on.
Yeah.
And I think it was always really clear to me that it's not helping anybody to rebuild without a really solid grasp of how these fires happen so frequently, and they're so dangerous and they're so costly, and insurance is no longer going to bail people out. And what are we doing to people? You know, we're putting people, you know, we're making people homeless, and that's with insurance payouts, right? And that's, you know, climate change is escalating. All these factors are only getting worse currently, although hopefully the problems are coming into focus and we can turn this around. But if I thought that it was helpful to just comfort people, and I think one of the people in our film who's obviously so brilliant is Zeke. And he really says it so beautifully when he says, you know, it's just, we're just not doing people any favors. And so I kind of really, like, that's something of tension in the film that's really interesting for me, is kind of loving these individuals and yet en masse, seeing the disastrous decisions. I mean, this is for me the sort of enormous sort of shock of the film, was to kind of discover in this moment that we can kind of capture them, how we're going wrong with climate change, with pandemic, with everything. It's just individually, yeah, everyone's lovable and fallible, and we've got our human psychology and we're attached to different things. And you bundle that all together and we're like, just, you know, burning up the place. And we don't mean to be, and we're just, you know, doing our little best. But it's really interesting to, I think, just understand how the individual best and the individual lovable character kind of adds up to this picture where we're not making great collective decisions, and it's really hard to do that. So I just thought that was really sort of fascinating to kind of glimpse that machinery.
Yeah, I think it was also brilliant. There was a moment that tied that then into a sort of comparison of wearing masks or not wearing masks, and sort of, you know, how we do or do not do these things to take care of our homes, and that affects the home next to it, and so on and so forth, and the whole place can burn down because you didn't bother to do these things. And it really does seem like that's applicable to everything in human society. And we're just so, I mean, it's true, like, you know, you bring that sort of that more collective society thinking to that kind of very much individualistic American society. And you can sort of see where these things are not, are at odds with each other.
Yeah, I think last year was when I was editing it through this pandemic, you know, or this last year, we only just finished it, even though it sort of premiered at Sundance, it wasn't quite done at that point. Obviously that's been top of mind, you know, and looking at different cultures address the pandemic in different ways. And being from Europe and living now in California, obviously gives me that kind of twin lens again, which is quite useful as a way of sort of understanding the different strengths and tendencies of different cultures. So for me, you know, you do scratch the surface, and there's still some European part of me that's shocked that the quirkiness of the house is still so vitally important. But I think it is culturally, you know, these, you know, and I'm also an immigrant myself, right? We're all coming alone, and we're leaving the collective behind, actually, when we immigrate to the US. So I think it's kind of different people that are here, and different, it's just a whole different mindset. And anyway, it was just fascinating to see that reflected in the flames, so to speak.
And I mean, really, the comparison with Malibu is really fascinating when you get down to the guy who's showing us the house with the heat resistant glass, talking about how these people are building homes with the Mediterranean style that's just, you know, a fire waiting to happen in that area. And you're like, oh, right, the rich liberals are just as much to blame for the things that they're putting up.
And I was appalled, because as I was learning about, you know, fire resilient building things, and I was learning that, you know, the eaves were where the flames got in, and, you know, all these different things. And, you know, these lovely people who I befriended would show me the plans for their new house, you know, and I think, oh my God, you know what I mean? Like, how is this disconnect happening, that I know this information, but they're not trusting it, or there's just other people are selling them flammable houses, and or they don't understand that these things really actually do make a difference. You know, it seems like, well, maybe that's not quite true, and I can still have what I want. You know, no, it really is a sort of true fact thing, and that message isn't clear. And yeah, it was amazing to me that it wasn't just obvious and established, and yeah.
So I just want to talk a little bit about the discovery process, because the film does take you into some really interesting directions as it unfolds, including discovering the private firefighters, which gives us the title of the movie. So tell us a little bit about what you knew going into it, and then what major things you discovered along the way, and how you sort of structured it from there.
Well, I knew climate change going in, you know, and I thought I was making a climate change, you know, movie. And then it turned out to be not just climate change. And there were loads of different things, actually, even like the bark beetle infestations and different things that I really looked at, and the lack of the horns to warn the people, you know, ocean sirens and things like that. Like, there were lots of sort of, you know, theories about like what we needed and what was the problem. And it was just about methodically, you know, investigating everything and seeing what really stood up, and just really trying to learn everything. And I felt really, you know, kind of that the stuff that's in the movie is the stuff that really is significant, and really stayed with me as the most important kind of things that I was really appreciating, understanding, and that really was my kind of food for thought, kind of as a journey. But ultimately, I suppose I did make a climate change film, because I think that, as we were just talking about, you know, ultimately I think it's a film about how difficult it is to take action collectively, and thus the situation that we're in with the climate. So I think it was interesting to kind of come out with a really interesting angle on the climate situation, that was perhaps much more interesting than like, hey, climate change is already here, which was kind of my initial sort of thesis, I suppose, if I needed a thesis, which I don't necessarily. But I just sort of went on a journey, and I had committed to just getting to the bottom of it. I didn't want to stop until I felt like I had it all. It would have been convenient to get like the, you know, quick answer, but I felt like, having witnessed what I witnessed, and getting to know residents and firefighters, and actually that had inspired me to make the film, to start with knowing residents and firefighters who were so affected, and who was like back in their homes, I'm never going to see them again, risking their lives, or having their lives, you know, at risk, and just this drama. And I thought, nobody gets how dire and life or death things are. Like a mile from here. And by the way, I could live there too. I just not to because I live in Venice, you know, like we're on the front lines here. And do we know that even? You know, so I felt really like the stakes were too high not to just really like figure it out, and to shortchange that felt really irresponsible somehow, even though it would have been neat to film, right? If there was only one thing and then we could just do that one thing, it'd be like, yay, much easier film to make. So it was a real, like, one of those things where you kind of challenges your filmmaking. I felt like challenged my filmmaking a lot because I had to deal with this really messy, big, and then challenging. You don't want to be giving people like really bad news. I've not quite done that before. I've made kind of inconvenient films. I made a film about nuclear weapons that was not much full of laughs. You know what I mean? I also love my other films where there's more, you know, upbeat emotional stuff, but and character driven stuff. But you know, I felt like this was a really tall order, but I felt really proud, I suppose, that I didn't shortchange the tall order, if I'm kind of not mixing my metaphors too badly. And yeah, that was what we set out to do. And yeah,
it certainly helped me to really understand driving through the canyons, particularly like Las Virgenes and Malibu Canyon, like Canyon Dune, like when you're going from the valley into Malibu, why some houses seemed completely unaffected and others were completely burned down. Like how I was like thinking like how the physics of that worked, and then just sort of understanding a whole bunch of different things between, you know, from the private firefighters, but also the construction of the houses, the measures put into place by certain homeowners to protect their properties versus others that probably, you know, weren't putting things into place, and all of that sort of, there is a way to sort of coexist, you know.
Yeah, there really is. And I think that fire resilient architecture is a really big piece of it. And I'm glad you said that, because what I wanted as well in the film was to kind of equip viewers, like to show you what it's like inside the film and to give you all the information so that you can be empowered to understand the situation and how it really unfolds. And so to come to your own understanding, because it was extraordinary. The number of people I interviewed in Malibu who looked sensible, and halfway through our interview, they'd start talking about how laser pointers had clearly started the fire, because how else do you account for the fact that one house went up and one house didn't? Yeah. And it's just lack of understanding about how fire spreads. Fire doesn't spread the way that we think it spreads. It is these ember storms, and they do catch on things. It is a sort of, it is a thing that isn't quite what you think it is, but hopefully that is now in the story. And one of the biggest compliments in a way I've been receiving is we've done a bunch of screenings with news anchors who cover fires. Our film is wonderfully being released by Paramount Plus and CBS-N. And so we've done a lot of screenings with like CBS anchors, because they like in the family and they're fantastic, plenty of people. So I've been meeting lots of CBS anchors who cover fires, and they keep saying like, I've never seen anything that actually feels like being in the fire. Obviously their reports do, but they're always doing the, you know, 2-minute version, and this is more of a picture. And I thought that was a great compliment, because of course that's what we're trying to do making documentaries, is capture, you know, and convey a little bit of what things are really like. Again, I didn't want to just show that horror to show off my filmmaking skills or to be horrific like a horror movie or something. I really wanted to you know, understand how hellish it is, how really literally hell like this stuff is, and fatal, and the worst kind of fatal, not the way you want to go fatal, you know. And then to really convey the stakes. And so you also understand how exactly it works. And they're all the details of the fire. They wanted so people actually could really get the hang of what actually is going on, the reality of it.
What was the hardest, I guess, the hardest component of the film to, I guess, put together in terms of a segment? I mean, you've got a lot of human stories that you're following, and that's, I'm sure, that poses one challenge, meeting people that, trust you to tell their stories. You've amassed a lot of footage, crowdsourcing some of the live footage of fires that people have experienced. You're doing research into sort of historic fires and trying to tell that visually so that we understand it. What was for you the hardest part?
Gosh, everything was a little Herculean. We also filed freedom of information requests to get the radio traffic and done one calls. Editing was Herculean because we had a haystack of stuff. And it was all very PC. Again, as a filmmaker, it's easy when you've got, as a documentary filmmaker, you've got one story or, one character. And in this case, I wanted to tell the story more as a mass event through the experience of multiple firefighters and residents. But of course, that's so itty bitty. And actually, all the stories were kind of scraps. So you're kind of trying to concoct something coherent and compelling out of just all these shards. And I've never put myself in the movie as a narrator before, but I felt like that my journey helped, I think, find a line through that was a driving narrative arc, I felt. And also, I suppose that my own journey as a European to come to California and kind of misunderstood the landscape and just wanted it to be like Europe where you could put the fires out, or New York, and that sort of misunderstanding the landscape turned out to be, of course, actually part of the story, because it is, I think, what the European settlers had done with this landscape, suppressed the indigenous practices, applied, kind of European, European hammer to nail, kind of like, if it's a landscape, it shouldn't burn, kind of misunderstanding. And so I thought that was part of the story. So I put myself in. And then it was really, every sequence had its challenges. It was really traumatic to, manage all that material with the fires. And yet it was also really extraordinary because I felt like I'd spoken to so many people and gathered so much video. I felt like I had this just incredible kaleidoscopic sort of understanding of what was going on at each intersection at every moment of the incidents, and that was a kind of funny feeling. Or I'd meet somebody and they hadn't met the person that rescued them, but I had. And so you could put those, stories together. You could put the guy who was rescued by the bulldozer driver and the bulldozer driver, and you could put them together, and you could also put together the footage of the bulldozer and the pedestrians he also rescued who were in the cab. And that was sort of extraordinary kind of, documentary is such a kind of machine. It's kind of like as a telescope, helps you see the stars, or a microscope helps you see small things. I think that documentary is a machine that helps you kind of see how reality works. And I just felt like this had this just extraordinary vision, or like grasp, audio video material of really the whole incident. And that was extraordinary and challenging. But I think that you can see, we put together, nothing's recreated. It looks almost like we kind of scripted and recreated it to match, but actually we just found all these things that kind of paired and matched. It was extraordinary. And then I think the other material is really challenging because you're trying to tell kind of, I don't like to tell talking head stories. I want to be a filmmaker. I went to film school. I want to make cinema and, move audiences and inspire them. I'm not sort of an activist with a camera or a journalist with a, Avid or something. I'm trying to, make cinema and have, use this wonderful medium, and yet, bundles of clunky info, is really tricky. So it tested me, I think, and our whole team to just try to sort of find this way. And it is a little bit of a different kind of a film for me. And I think that's maybe been good because, I kind of like to break my own rules as a filmmaker, because I feel like, each time you tackle new material, it should ask you for different things. Each story is unique and needs a different approach, I think. And so tough as it was, I felt that maybe it was good that I was approaching it differently and learning new sort of tricks and things. Yeah.
Well, I think it's fantastic that you put yourself into this film, uh, especially for some context for the times when, in addition to the moments of narration, we actually hear you interacting in the interviews, particularly that amazing moment when you tell the person you're talking to that he's aligning himself with the tree huggers, which is,
Like you heard that. Yeah, no, it's interesting that you, there's a long pause when I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, this is like the most gun-toting, Trump voting, anti-environmentalist, like logging maniac. And he's telling me that plastic's destroying the town. You know what I mean? And you're thinking like, oh my gosh, there's hope for humanity, right? We're actually on the same page when you get past the language. And there's a long pause and I say, you and the tree huggers, that's right. And you heard it. And for me, that's a beautiful moment. No, I enjoy those interactions, and it was fun here kind of having them sort of poke through the screen sort of thing. And so you do get the sense that all these interactions are just sort of me like rocking up to people and trying to engage them and find out what's going on, you know. And I felt like the climate change discussions when I love the moment when you see that wonderful man telling me that climate change is a hoax and that he doesn't benefit from it. And I thought, gosh, it's such an interesting elaboration of that point. Like, we've really got to take that on board. Like, this is perhaps a real misunderstanding that like the whole climate change thing, people think that it's being talked about because people are benefiting from it. Like, we could talk about that and address that and correct that. Like, there's some misunderstandings that we could maybe more helpfully engage people about. But then when he turns to me and says, like, you're not from New York, are you? And I love it.
your thick New York accent.
I know, that's right. And I just thought, gosh, you know, that's where we're at, you know, and I'm an outsider and I'm not of his mindset and or locale. And I'm an outsider, and to him, a New Yorker is an outsider, and the New Yorker is someone who believes in climate change. I say believe like it's Santa Claus, but like, you know, is on this sort of science end of, you know, goes with the science, as I say in the film, climate change. Yes, and I love those conversations though, because I felt like they were really, really illuminating, right? Really illuminating.
So I know that we have some questions coming in, and I want to turn it over to them. I just want to quickly say to the audience out there that we have the ability to bring you over to actually turn on your camera and say hello and ask your question live. So when I do that, I'm going to just put a running order, and if you prefer that I just ask your question instead, you can just tell me or put a note in the Q&A. And before I do that, I did get an email from someone who was asking a question, which was when you were talking to I guess the people who were mentioning the statistic about firefighters coming from the penal system. If there was any further research that you did with that, or if you spoke to any prisoners who were acting as firefighters, because that was a really interesting topic.
There's a book coming out all about that, and I think there's going to be a lot more reporting on that. I felt like it was a fascinating point that, you know, I really want other people. I think there's even a documentary just about that coming out, if I'm not mistaken. So I felt like it's obviously really important. There was also a news story last week about a firefighter who got turned over to ICE, I think, on the day that he was released after having, you know, been fighting fires and being a fantastic model inmate and stuff. So I kind of felt like it was really wonderful, fascinating stuff. But I just, you know, the film is by far my longest. It's almost 2 hours, and I felt like I didn't want to, you know, overburden it anymore. When I was glad we included that point, but I felt like that is its own story.
Okay, so I'm gonna invite over Gloria, and let's see if Gloria wants to turn on her camera or not. I know that that was a bit abrupt. I usually do this spiel at the beginning, and I kind of forgot to. So Gloria, you're welcome to just jump on in here if you like.
Oh, thank you.
You're so welcome.
First of all, I wanted to say that I didn't know, for some reason, I was expecting something else, but I didn't know that Lucy was so young.
And it's a nice lighting. I don't know. I'm not that young, but thank you.
Wow, you are very talented. It makes me feel so proud that a woman has accomplished this. You know, it's such an important, interesting topic. And one of the things I didn't know myself, that global warming, it's connected. It has a connection with all these wildfires. I didn't know that. And how or when did they make this connection?
Well, I think it's, as we say in the film, you know, for me, I was interested in exactly how climate change is making the fires worse, not just in general, but I think it's about the nighttime temperatures making the firefighting harder, and also these extreme events that we're seeing more and more of. And we've seen some terrible extreme events, you know, this year with the heat dome, last year with the dry lightning strikes. I mean, these are very extreme events, and extreme temperature fluctuations drive extreme winds, and extreme drought is obviously, you know, creating this tinderbox. So these extreme events, so I think that's really important. I also loved it in the film though, when that wonderful guy Steve Pine really talks about us as fire creatures, and this quest for fire, and how fossil fuels are us kind of like fire crazy and burning all this extra stuff and not being able to deal with it. And that's actually, that imbalance is climate change. And it's then driving the fires, and it's kind of like a fire vicious cycle. I thought that was really a fascinating perspective. And again, it's sort of just, it's sort of a dry point, but for me, I felt that it earned its place in the film, even though it is quite reflective and kind of philosophical almost, much more so than perhaps my other films have been. You know, it's sort of almost an essay, I think, at that point, to include that stuff.
Yeah, you said the word, this vicious cycle that seems to be going on, especially in Malibu. And because they're saying, you know, the houses burn, the land burns, and then all of a sudden they start building again, and it goes on, they burn again. And so this vicious cycle. And somebody mentioned this phrase, European arrogance. And you have this guy explaining, he was talking about his house that didn't burn. He said the windows are made of this. I think Alessandro mentioned this, and the walls are made so the house didn't burn. But also the herd immunity is not there, because this guy thinks in one way, but the rest of them do not. So the vicious cycle is gonna continue, it seems.
Yeah, I think that's what the film really
points out. Yes.
Is how hard it is to make change. But I do have hope, because I do feel like the problems are coming into focus in a new way. You know, even from when I began the film to now, you know, I don't think we were quite so clear about the impact of fire suppression. And I think the question is now about the logging company and them, the fact that they're changing their planting around that area, for example. I do think that these things will be changing. The building codes have changed recently. The insurance companies are changing their policies. And so I think things are hopefully will change. You know, always there's a time lag, isn't there, with change? But I hope that there will be change.
Well, thank you for your answers and for making this documentary. It was eye-opening for me, and I think it will be for many people. And it's so well put together. I mean, from beginning to end, great job. I'm not an expert, but I think you did a great job. Congratulations.
I so appreciate it. Where are you from?
Pardon?
Where are you from?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Where are you from originally? Where's your accent? I was trying to place your accent.
Oh, from Central America.
Ah, beautiful.
Sí, sí.
Clearly a New York accent.
No, no. Well, no.
Any foreign accent is now a New York accent.
No, it's Puerto Rican.
Ah, okay.
Sí, my husband is from Puerto Rico. Sí. Sí. But Alessandro knows I also speak Italian, so it could be a mix of everything.
Well, grazie.
Prego.
Ciao Gloria, alla prossima.
Ciao.
Okay, so let's bring on Raj, and then we'll bring on Margaret. I think I've got Raj coming on. You know what? While that's happening, I should also say that Jane has a question that she wanted me to ask, which is where did you start with your research for the film? Oh, Raj, let me just quickly have Lucy answer a question that came from Jane and then jump in.
Well, the research is the organic answer is from just being a California resident and like smelling the smoke, reading the papers, looking at the news, worrying about my friends who are residents and firefighters, especially during the Thomas fire. I had friends and ultimately our producer Holly, who had family members who were both firefighters and residents in that Thomas fire, and me just being so worried about them. And it went on and on. It became at the time the biggest fire ever in California. And so it really was just sort of organic there. And then talking to everybody I could, reading everything I could, talking to experts, talking to firefighters, talking to residents, reading everything, both news and books, and suddenly hanging out with firefighters and doing ride-alongs, sleeping in fire station floors, and really, and the firefighters are really knowledgeable. They really helped me understand a lot as well. So lots of ways, all the ways with the research.
Oops, Raj, it's all yours.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Alex. It's really wonderful to see your film second time. First time I saw it at the drive-in theater in Hollywood. I missed to ask one question. Did the White House or California governor saw this film? Did you ever screen that film?
Not yet. I mean, we just finished it. I'd love that, but I haven't heard that they will yet. But I'd be obviously very thrilled. And they are probably a little bit busy right now with other stuff, but they should watch the film. That'd be fantastic.
Yes, Agua can influence all the time. Agua is one of the best film school here in the nation you are with, and I'm from Trojan family. Also, I cover this in the newspaper, in Indian newspaper, and a lot of buzz about the film. I just wanted to show you that very quickly, and which I sent it to ECME also. I hope you saw that. If not, my contact is in this question, so maybe I can share with you. Yeah, it's a really pleasure to see this film, and a really wonderful job you did. Thank you very much for sharing. And if any possibility comes to screen that one, I will try to influence also.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, you know, if I could just jump on that, and here, Raj, I'm going to move you back over to attendee. You know, it's interesting. I remember when Trump was talking about the California wildfires, is there needing to be more sort of like it's a issue of different land management, and you know, sort of thinking at the time like that's not necessarily wrong, not necessarily that he was putting forward the right proposal, but that you know there are different ways of thinking about this, and it seems like we have been stuck in a model. I mean, in your film really does point out a lot of other ways that we can be going about this, but just because Trump says something, immediately it's sort of like you want to like just reject the idea that anything coming out of his mouth could be worth listening to.
Yeah, the trouble was he would say sometimes he'd said land management, but what he associated that was with California was putting the water into the ocean.
Mm.
We should rake the leaves like they do in
Right.
Asia. If you
Now it's all coming back to me now.
Yeah. What was the other? And then more logging. So it was like there was a mention of land management that could go in a sensible direction, but there was more stuff that was really wildly off base about blaming California, or blaming California, blaming the breaking of the leaves, etc. And
it did seem though that there was a certain amount of like, well, there's a lot of fuel out there that is helping the fire, and the fuel needs to get taken out of the equation.
Yeah, I get you that exactly right. I get you that it is good to sort of not politicize that and think, ultimately I had Trump in there for a bit, and there's also a very infamous piece where he visits paradise and calls it pleasure. And it's so easy to sort of laugh at that stuff. And I felt like, in the raking of the leaves, and I felt like it's really better not to. I felt like we've seen enough of that guy.
Oh yeah.
We're trying to heal the wounds here and have the sensible conversation with the sensible language moving forward. So I didn't feel I needed to hark back, except to really establish why it was important that the logging story we kind of had backwards.
Right.
Because I too, intuitively, logging does seem to, kind of make sense, and I remember that was my first reaction, was like, logging, and that seems kind of okay. And even, I was talking to the Paradise mayor, and she talked about the nice trees, and I was thinking, chop them down, like get the trees out of the way. And not understanding that was actually not going to solve the problem. So yeah.
Well, that goes well into Margaret's question, and I know Margaret's here. So Margaret, if you want to turn on your camera, you're welcome to go ahead and ask it.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Lucy. I first wanted to tell you, thank you so much for making this film. I've been a California resident my entire life. The fires are like, I live in Santa Clarita, so the fires are pretty much, just constantly in the back of your mind all the time. And yet with the first 10 minutes of your film, I was so like hooked in, like I was crying the entire time, like watching this footage and watching you tie in like every paranoid thought that I have, every bit of these ideas about my reality that, I try to kind of stifle. Like you brought them all to the forefront in such a beautiful way. And just like, first of all, thank you so much for making this film. And then secondly, I just wanted to, jump on that question and jump on my question, which is about the Sierra Pacific Industries. In the film, you mentioned that they were gonna stop putting in like tree buds when they were growing them, since it was causing all these fires. But there was no mention of like the logging that they were actually doing, of cutting down the trees, which, the first thing that comes to my mind is the Dust Bowl, which is when, they were cutting down all these trees, creating all these wind tunnels. I guess that's what they called windstorms in the South. And I'm like, is there going to be is there more to do? Is there like, should we be like writing letters or something about Sierra Pacific industry?
There's some brilliant activists who'd really appreciate it if you did. And I think, as far as I can tell, they are kind of right, and, Sierra Pacific Industries, I think, will be rethinking things because they're losing trees and they can't actually ensure their own crop. And the trees for them are a kind of 100-year crop. They need them to grow, for they can harvest them. So they're losing money with these fires, except it gets complicated. It gets complicated, or are they? Because but the small concession that I'd understood at the end is kind of like it was kind of for me, that was a little, hopefully, show of promise. It's nothing that's guaranteed to happen or is very solid or has happened yet. And it's only in that little area where I think fires burn so repeatedly and is now burning again with the Dixie fire that I think that, you know, that really got their attention. And I don't believe people are, you know, poorly intentioned necessarily, but again, I think the problems may be coming into focus. So I kind of wanted to, you know, kind of give the benefit of the doubt, and I am quite confrontational in the film. I do think that I hold them to account, as I felt when I spoke to everyone that was really called for, and that no other journalist was sort of telling that story. But I also, you know, like to think that things are going to get better, and that was what I heard. So it's what it is in the film, and that came through. Yeah.
I'd like to add on that note of optimism, what you shared about the Native Americans' method of, you know, doing the controlled burns. That gave me such a ray of hope, because I had heard about this before in environmental science years and years and years ago when I took it for like a prereq. And it's like, I guess, I don't know, was that conversation forgotten, or like, I don't know what happened, but you bringing it up again just reassured me that there is a natural way to handle this. And again, thank you so much.
No, there is. And it's not always straightforward to implement. You know, people don't like the smoke. There is a very, very, very low risk they can get out of control. But of course, if one does, you never hear the end of it. And a lot of red tape and you know, getting all these people together, and so it's quite expensive. And then if the wind kicks up, like, you have to cancel the whole thing, you know. Or so it's a real challenge to kind of pull that off with the political climate. But I think it is time to look at that, because obviously where we're at is, you know, as they say in the film, you know, it's the only way to really manage at scale. And I think that's so I yeah, for me that was fascinating, that this technology had existed all along and we just hadn't availed ourselves of it, and that hopefully we will be now.
I think your movie will do a lot for that cause, and I'm going to be telling my friends, so if that does anything,
great. Thank
we'll
you.
see.
I love
Thank
it.
you.
Margaret.
Yes.
So that then brings us to this last question, which is really just about, you know, how people can spread the word. When is it going to be available?
Yeah.
How can people watch it? Tell us.
So it's in theaters now. Still, lots of theaters, including several in Los Angeles, which is amazing. And hopefully, you know, the big screen experience is a wonderful big screen experience. But then starting on Friday, it's going to be streaming on Paramount Plus and also CBSN at certain times, but also on demand. And the CBSN app, you can download the app and then watch it for free. Anyone can. So it's really, really accessible. So that's a really nice way to spread the word, so that anyone can watch it, which I'm really happy, because I think there's a lot of communities that you just want to be able to share it with that might not subscribe to certain things. And that's, released from this Friday. So that's super exciting, and still quite early days, I think. Excuse me. I'm a bit jet lagged. But it was still early days with Parent Plus and documentaries, CBSN and documentaries, but it's really exciting, and to be available that way. So it's really cool.
Well, Lucy, thank you so much for doing this and joining us tonight. And, you know, best wishes with the theatrical. And then, you know, for anyone who misses it in theaters, please make sure people are watching this film on Paramount Plus and CBSN. And yeah, I mean, I hope you get some rest.
Thank you. Yeah.
I realized like I would have let you go sooner.
I know, bedtime. All right. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.